Okay, so good morning, everyone. So as you know, I'm a licensed diver of the London, and my husband, Steve, you might know him, he's the licensee, he holds the license, and he's really passionate about the archaeology side. Right, I'm just going to go forward on the slides. Actually, I'll go forward one more, because just to tell you what I'm going to... Right, so yeah, anyway, so Steve helps me with the archaeology research, and I do the artwork for the site, and today I'm going to take you on, I hope it's a fascinating journey of reimagining the London using the art and storytelling. So I'm going to tell you how I use art reconstructions to interpret the artefacts from the London. And first of all, I'm going to show you my artistic journey, and then I'll take you through some examples of my work, how I work, and things that I've learnt along the way. So, and then at the end, I'll show you how the approach I feel could reach wider audiences, just to keep the story of the London alive. It's something that to me is really important. And it's something that I don't really see done because I've searched on the internet to help me with my learning, but I can't find it anywhere. So anyway, so my journey into art. So around about 30 years ago, I started painting, and it was purely because we wanted some pictures for our home. And so I taught myself, it was back in the day of libraries, I taught myself from library books, and it was mainly oil and acrylic. And I sold work on a website. I started doing commissions, and my still lifes were compared to the old master style, you know, with the dark background and bottle of wine, cheese, that type of thing. And I was even asked to paint an illustration for a cover of a book back in the day, which was that was quite amusing because it was unusual. It was a plate of spaghetti. Anyway, after that, life became quite busy. There was a recession back in the day, and I had to work more in my normal job. And so my work paused, people stopped buying art, and I just sort of fell out of it, really. But it was something I always dreamed of doing art when I retired, you know, looking forward to when I retired. And eventually I retired. So I thought I'd be a part-time artist. And I'll just show you where I am, what became of my retirement, my more recent artwork. Right, so yeah, so anyway, I learned coloured pencils. I learned online through tutorials, so online tutorials, many layers of sharp pencils, and it was mainly pet portraits and fluffy animals, wildlife, that type of thing. So it isn't really archaeology. So it was learning textures, but it's not quite the same. But so I wanted to move on and learn my own way, really. So I had to adapt in order to bring archaeology to life. But the way I think it works really well, because with coloured pencils, you can do a lot of detailed work. You can see here in these pictures the detail. And I thought I'd just let you know at this point, a lot of artists use photos for their work, copying photos. And that's really how people are trained. But that can be a problem when you can't get a 17th century photo to copy. So just bear that in mind. So just moving on to tell you about the wreck first. So this is a wonderful painting by Richard Enzer. Sorry to say he's not here today, but he's donated this to us, really just for us and the NAS to use. And it's really bringing the London back to life. So it was a 17th century warship which exploded in the Thames in 1665 while it was preparing for the Second Anglo-Dutch War. And it was part of the fleet that brought Charles back to the throne. And there was about 300 people that died at the time. because the explosion, it was thought to be an accident with gunpowder, but they don't really know for sure what caused it. So now the wreck is laying in the Thames, and it's on the edge of a really busy shipping lane, and it's very difficult to dive. It's because the currents in the Thames are really fast. It's really dark, really dark. I mean, it's 0 to half a metre visibility, and the currents, they're just constantly cover and uncover the artefacts. They wash them away, but there's some really precious artefacts down there. So the artefacts may or may not be conserved if they come up, if we're lucky to bring them up before they're washed away, that is. So the thing is, there's often a problem with storage, funding, etc. And without all of that, you know, they can be lost forever. And so as a diver in London, I see how important it is, how challenging the diving is, etc. So I'll give you an example. My first dive on Site 1, and this was before we had any licenses to bring anything up, I found a carriage wheel, and then the next dive we did, it was gone. And the second dive, or the first dive I did on Site 2 with Steve showing me around, we had piles and piles of shoes. I mean, shoes have been recovered, but most of those piles are gone. So, you know, it's very sad, isn't it? So now I'm going to move on to the artistic process. Now, this picture, see the middle sketch, it's terrible. And this is part of the artistic process. So, so I always start the artistic process with evidence, which is usually in the form of a photograph of the artifact and the measurements. And I look for comparisons of similar items in museums, online, books, wherever I can find it really, and look at textures and materials. And then I create sketches. So that will be a first sketch of a shoe and some examples of my comparisons. But you can see it's not really anything like the London, so it had to be adapted. And later on, you will see the actual shoe picture that resulted from that. So each picture, it's a known thing with artists, it goes through the childish, the juvenile stage, so don't worry about that. And sometimes I use AI to help me. But as I said, we haven't got the photographs to copy. And then at the end, I will refine everything to a finished artwork, just to balance everything, the impact, the accuracy, but it has to be grounded with the research. And I mean, I really love using the photos to help me with the artwork, because you can really get the texture, the light. But when you're imagining the past and there isn't any, it's so difficult. I have to create my own, combining pictures, sometimes using some of my own, like with the shoe, my own objects. I had a picture of my own shoe, which I'll show you later, so when we come back to that. So I'm just going to move on to the tuning peg, because as I said, I select a fragment that needs identified. Now, I normally choose something that you haven't got a clear picture from the artifact. So you haven't got a clear photograph, it hasn't come up perfect, there's a lot missing, because what would be the point if we recovered something and it showed you everything about that artifact? There would be no point. I wouldn't be filling in any gaps. I wouldn't be telling you any more information. So I normally select something that's very challenging and difficult. That's my problem. And like I said, I gather the evidence, reconstruct, and working without photographs. So it's very, very slow process. So it's not just the studying, and it's not, I mean, the artwork can take 40 hours. just the art, and then probably just as long for finding the information about the artifact, because I want it to be right. You know, like with the violin for the tuning peg, you can't just do any violin. There are differences between the violins in the 17th century and violins of today. It might not show in that picture. So with each artifact that we've got downstairs on the stand, I've written something out, and I learn quite a lot for each artifact that I draw. So this next picture is about working without photographs again. And the top of the lamp here, which Steve recovered, you can't really see from that what it is, can you? So there's a picture we have, which the Mary Rose Trust kindly let us use, but my drawing wasn't exactly the same because I wanted to show that there was a candle inside the lantern, and there was only 5 of the supports. So, and the picture in the Mary Rose, it looks like there was more, but I'm not sure if that's their reconstructions, just how it was supporting the lantern. I'm not sure if it was different, but I know on the London there was only 5 on the lanterns, so another reason why it was different. So we're going back to the shoe now. So this was my first drawing, and so the first picture there is how it looked when it was recovered. It was really dark, flattened, and it's very fragile when it comes out of the water. So there's that picture in the middle, which I was explaining earlier, of how I use my own photo. In fact, I used quite a few photos of shoes because I wanted, in order to get the shape of the shoe, you need to have the light. Otherwise, it won't look realistic. So that's one of the shoe photos. And I also used one of my trainers and put some string in it. It was actually wool because I couldn't find any string. But because we noticed on that recovered shoe, there was some string, and it tells us the story how the sailor had probably substituted string for the leather lace. So whatever was happening aboard the ship, he rushed, put the string in, whatever. So it tells us something about it, which is, to me, that's interesting. So the next picture is the gun carriage. And you can see this is currently on display in Southend Museum. And to me, I can't see from the picture how the gun carriage looked in the 17th century because the wood is quite dark, and we know that on the London, the wood was made of elm and it was quite a light wood. They particularly used that wood for cannons that were on board ships because they were better for the saltwater weather bearing. So I recreated that with pictures. Again, one of Richard Enser's fantastic pictures and other pictures as well in order to get the accuracy. So for me, it's a blend of detective work, creative engineering, and then I came up with that final picture and put some background just to give it some context. But of course, we wanted the cannon on top of that. So again, there's the cannon, which is currently sitting in the Thames still in 18 metres of water. And from what I understand, it's reburied. So it's quite sad. So it's reburied. The cannon's reburied, that's what I mean. So anyway, yeah, and again, it's lack of funds to bring the cannon up. So sorry, I'm really distracted. So anyway, when we first saw the cannon, it was so fantastically preserved underwater, and it was like a bluey colour. And the thing is about cannons, they tell us so much more. They tell us so much the story of 17th century, because to me, archaeology is the story of the time, isn't it? It's the story of the people, what went on. It isn't just, this is a cannon, this is I don't know, this is a shoe, it's the story of the people, what was happening. And it tells us, because if the cannon lasts that well, the way it was created, it often lasts longer than the actual ship. So it's part of the ship's legacy. So again, as I said previously, using references, historical analogues, so it helps fill the gaps. Now this flagon was donated by Paul Gilson, a local fisherman, and we don't know 100% for sure that it was from the London, but it was recovered near there. And don't worry, because it was before the London became a protected wreck. And it shows the reality of what it's like on the seabed. It's indented, corroded, bumpy. But I compared that with intact pewters and flagons, studying their shine and shape, and reimagined how it might have looked clean, bright, and functional. And it's a way of allowing us to transform fragments and complete recognizable objects as well as unrecognizable objects into how they might have looked. So just show you, so objects of daily life. I know you've seen some of these pictures, but it's just to show that if they're objects from daily life, they give us the most direct connection with the people, as I explained. So like a shoe is recognisable, isn't it? A 17th century shoe, you would know that was a shoe straight away, whereas the top of the lantern, I wouldn't know what that was, but it helps us connect with the people, whether they're recognisable or not. Now, something else I learned, which I find really exciting, this is probably my favourite part actually, it's called vanitas. I don't know if you've heard of vanitas, and to me, it tells me what the 17th century people were thinking, how they were feeling. And because lavish religious art was discouraged, and they used this as a way of giving out moral messages. So the Vanitas paintings in those days were to remind the viewers of the transience of life and the futility of worldly possessions. So, in other words, they wanted to combine beauty with the moral reflection of saying that pleasure, wealth, and learning are fleeting, set against the certainty of death. So that's why there was often pictures of skulls and extinguished candles, empty vessels and instruments. So I did my own vanitas, which was based on objects that have been raised from the London. The only thing in that picture was the rosary beads that we haven't found, but they could well have been on the London because people of that time were very religious. So it gives the objects back their symbolic power and not just their physical form, like I said, how they were feeling, symbolism. So I have some more information if I don't have time to explain it all here, but on our stand downstairs on all of these. But the flagon was a reflection of the soul, indulgence, vanity, pipe and transient pleasure, passage of time, book, the Bible, knowledge, faith, eternal youth, the violin, fleeting beauty and the luxury of pleasure, and the shape of the violin was compared to the female form, apparently. So they invite reflection on what truly endures beyond the material world, as I said. Now, I did ask artificial intelligence to help me and create their own vanitas. They didn't do it exactly as I asked, but no, as you see, like on the oyster, they've beautiful pearl, but no oyster, which doesn't really exist. But the apple, if you think of an apple, Eve in the Garden of Eden, so the apple symbolises temptation, grapes, pleasure, the soul. Snail, the Virgin Mary's Immaculate Conception, insects, decay, transformation. Butterflies represent resurrection. Seashells, pearls, wisdom, beauty. Mirrors, any reflective item is vanity and the soul of examination. So you see, the butterfly is hovering over the cherries and the strawberries, which represent the souls of men. And I did ask it to have the dragonfly there as well, because that's the opposite. That's the devil. The dragonfly represents the devil. To have the devil and the butterfly fighting over the souls of men, but it didn't do the dragonfly. It's more positive, I suppose. So on that note, I created my own butterfly picture in commemoration of the 300 people that lost their lives on the wreck. Because it remembers them and it symbolises all of their souls. And you notice there is a ghost ship hidden as well, which represents the London. So it's not just about reconstruction, but meaning and memory. You know, ensure that the human life, the human story is not forgotten. So bringing this story to wider audiences, I think the shoe must be one of my favourite because I've used that quite a lot. But what I did, I used Canva to remove the background, because by digitally removing the background, you can use a clearer picture for teaching, exhibitions, publications. So art creates empathy and a human link, and the fragments can feel alive again. And the thing is, then you can connect with people that aren't normally associated with archaeology. It involves far more a wider audience. So the future, so to achieve accurate reconstructions, I rely on professional grade materials, and they produce the best results, the rich and permanent colours, but they are very expensive. So, for example, those pencils there, 100 pencils, is £300 or much more. And I normally have, you know, probably four different types of pencils, and I keep adding to it, as well as the pencil sharpeners and things. So, and pastel matte paper, which is the best because you can have 50 layers of pencils on that paper. And it is very strong. So if you get frustrated and end up throwing it across the room, it will survive. Often, I've also thrown quite a bit away where I've started new projects and it just doesn't feel right. So yeah, so that's how it is really. It isn't something that, although it is relatively low cost compared to major conservation or curation work, it's something that there's a good potential to expand this type of work and share more widely with the public, but it isn't something that I can sustain as a long-term project on my own. I think I've sort of reached what I can do with it on my own as such, but but through art we can bring the past back to life, not just for archaeologists but for everyone. And so I just wanted to show you AI is brilliant, but it's not always accurate because, yeah, I don't need to explain that slide, do I? So I think that's about all I've got to say in the time I've got. But as I said, I'll be on the stand and there's some more information there. And thank you very much for listening.
Well, thank you very much for showing us a different way of looking at archaeological artefacts. Now, do we have any questions? Yes.
Carol did that absolutely fantastic work, and I'm wondering if you've ever considered doing drawings of the site itself, not just the artifacts.
Not really. I don't know if I could, because
I think I would love Carol, because I think we're the only ones who really know the true concept or where the artifacts have come from. I think with Carol's talent, it would be good for Carol to do an illustration of like what the London is in our artwork, so we can add it to our site recorder software package. So it's another thing, another layer of the software to bring the site to life. So I personally would love Carol to do something like that with her talents.
see, once I have a challenge.
Well, you did say that you like the challenge.
Yeah, but you're the only one that could help me. You would have to help me, because I mean, Richard's one's brilliant, but
Yes.
Do you exhibit anywhere other than places like this? I mean, it's a great way of bringing it to the general public. You do studios, for example, or something like that.
not yet. I feel like I've only really just started colour pencils. I'm in an art club and they exhibit just small exhibitions twice a year, which I did once. I had good feedback. I didn't sell anything, but I'm hoping sort of next year to have a Facebook page and start moving on. It's just been sort of really busy this year, and I haven't got round to it. But yeah, I would like to build up some pictures so that I could in future.
Well, I think it's a marvellous illustration of what other archaeological sites could do with their artefacts. So thank you very much, Carol.